Okay, so as I mentioned a minute ago, we were originally going to start talking about GUI stuff, graphic user interface elements, and how to make a splash screen and some on-screen buttons. Well, that plan has been completely derailed, mostly because of what Unity has done this week. Before we started live streaming today, we started talking pretty directly about what the folks down at the Epic Games and Unreal was doing. But Unity has not had an insignificant week as well. They've done some pretty cool things. They had a really great tech announcement on their latest version of their game engine, Unity 5.6, which is imminent. They're going to be releasing a new version of the Unity editor here, I think within the next calendar month, and there's some good stuff in there. Specifically, if you go over to the Unity website, you can see exactly what they're planning on rolling out. Maybe with some pictures of the Game Developers Conference. So we're not going to watch the keynote, but there's some really great things in here. Let's see. Of course, they're not going to have it on their main page. I don't want to watch the presentation. There's the Unity booth. Hey, let's look real closely at the picture. Do we see any of our classmates in there? Wait, I know him. No, I don't know him. Okay. Yeah. So here's all the stuff that they're doing. So one of the things that's really kind of neat about what they're doing is they're really trying to tackle UIs, I think, a little bit more directly, and they're releasing for free a plugin, an asset that used to cost $100 called Text Mesh Pro, or Mesh Text Pro, excuse me. And it's pretty neat, and I've always wanted to play around with it because it's kind of the way UI stuff should be done in Unity. But at $100, I can't afford to spend $100 on an experiment. But now that it's free, I think it's something that we all should really look at, because from what I've seen in their demonstrations and their tutorials, it far surpasses the default UI tools that come with Unity. The reason why it's free is that Unity recognized that this is the best plugin that they possibly have for text and UI inside of Unity, so they've purchased it. They purchased it outright, and they haven't had a chance to roll that technology into the default tools, but it's free on the asset store. So we're going to be looking at that next week once I have an opportunity to download, experiment, look and see how it all works. I don't want to talk about something until I'm pretty comfortable with it myself. So we're going to do that next week, okay? And it's a nice conversation to have when everyone's here and present, everyone's returned from the Game Developers Conference. So we'll do UI stuff next week. However, I don't want to waste a week. I want to continue talking about the really fundamental big principles of working in our scripting library. So let's just take a look at it. So I have some assets here that we're going to play around with. I think today what we're going to start to do is just really get a good understanding of the scripting process, how to create some scripts, how to throw down a couple of lines of code, and begin writing some interactive text, or some text that's going to create an interaction between the player and the actual game itself. That's the function behind every line of code that we're going to be writing, is to physically generate an interaction. Up until now, our models, our levels, have been kind of static demos. They've been walkthroughs. They really haven't done anything in return to drive the experience forward. Well, starting today and moving forward the rest of the semester, every little week we're going to continue to expand upon our code base, our knowledge base of our code library. Let's make a simple little scene here real fast. All right, I'm going to just throw down a plane. There we go. Make it a little bit bigger. I'm also going to throw in the model of my house. And let's do this. I'm going to go into a one-column layout. Here, I'm going to show you how I kind of change my Unity interface. I actually really don't like the default interface. I think it's kind of a pain in the butt for me. I come from a direct content creation world, so I'm used to having toolbars on the left, all my panels and properties on the right, and a big viewport in the center, kind of exactly the way Miyamoto does it. So here's what I'm going to do just to make it easier for me, and this is exclusive. I'm going to put my hierarchy over here. There we go. And I'm also going to take my project panel, and I'm going to dock it below, and the console is going to go up top. Okay? All right, so now I have a big editor in here. I have my hierarchy up top. So these are all the game objects and assets that are currently involved in my level. And then I have my project panel down below. I'm not a big fan of that one column project panel. It just doesn't work for me. I like to see a list view, kind of a linear hierarchy of all the game assets that are currently imported into my Unity project. So this is the way I do it. I've said this before, and it's worth pointing out. Just whatever makes sense to you, man. Okay? If the other way works, it works, right? It doesn't work for me, so let's jump in and start looking at what we're going to build. All right, so I'm going to go in to my standard assets folder, and first person prefab here, I'm going to use the rigid body one. Okay? Let's throw that in and play our game. There we go. So my forge is a little small. Command P to stop the game. And while we're here, let's just make this a little bit bigger. Yeah, that's probably good enough for me. Okay, I lied. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. All right, now let's check it out. Yep, there we go. Okay, so my forge here has some really cool geometry, but one of the things that it doesn't have at the moment is what? Mesh colliders on the entirety of it, right? So going forward, how do we fix this? So we can import them from Modo, right? So we can create our own mesh colliders over in Modo, which is a great, great way of working. We went over that process much earlier in GCOM 424. In addition, we can also have Unity make their own mesh colliders. Look at every single piece of geometry on the mesh and create some collision information from those polygons. And I think that's initially what I'm going to ask Unity to do. So to do that, I'm going to go back into my project tab and find the root asset. There it is. And if we go into the model section of the import properties, I'm going to ask it to generate colliders right there. Of course, naturally, you have to apply it. A lot of folks, they forget to apply it. And now when I go back, that should have rippled to all the different assets inside of my scene. Blunk. There we go. And now I got collision information on every single surface on the outside of my forge, which is kind of fun. All right. So now that I'm beginning to build a small little network here, a small little level, I want to start creating some interaction between the game objects in my scene and the user itself. First and foremost, we have a tremendous problem here. You can cruise around. Of course, I walked off backwards. Whee! There she goes, right? Now, what's going to stop me inside of the scene? Not a single thing, right? There's nothing. There's no function inside the game that's going to determine when I should stop falling and when the game should stop or reset, or a behavior should be fired off, okay? So let's do this real fast. I want to stop the game. So what we're going to create here is a death zone, okay? And actually, we're going to create a whole series of scripts that work together to send information back and forth to one another to get some sort of action driving in the scene itself. Now, I would encourage you guys to follow along. I'm working with some very, very simple geometry. If you're working inside of Unity right now, just make a new scene or even just a new project. I have new projects all the time. This one's called my sandbox scene, right? And play along, because you're really not going to learn this until you get your hands dirty, until you're physically writing some code down and making all of this work. I'll give you guys a second to start that. All right, all right. So here's what we're going to do. Let's prototype for a second the logic that we need to establish in order for this relationship to work. You're never ever going to be able to write a single line of code or generate any sort of known interactivity if you really don't fundamentally understand what it is that you're trying to program. It seems obvious, but a lot of folks, they just kind of jump in without any sort of vision as to what in the world they're trying to make, right? So let's figure out for a second what we're trying to make. In this process, I'm not trying to think about any lines of code. I'm not thinking in computer terms right now. I'm just trying to think of a logic flow, right? Computers are pretty simple machines when it comes right down to it. They're just going to follow instructions. The logic flows that we establish, in essence, kind of establishes the sequential, set of instructions that we're going to ask the computer to follow, okay? So let's do this. I'm going to jot this on the board for a second. Let's prototype pretty quickly what this all looks like. Bright lights. Okay. So we're going to create a death zone, okay? What I'm trying to do here is not to prevent my gamer from walking off the edge of the platform, but to put his or her location back to a defined point when they do walk off of it, right? So that's the goal. You walk off the edge and you get teleported back to a very specific spot inside the scene itself, right? We're going to call this a death zone. Okay, so what do we need to establish inside of our death zone? We need to establish some sort of condition or state that determines that a character has walked off the edge, right? So we need to know, walked off the edge, okay? What else do we need to know? So we need to capture the moment, or we need to capture somehow the player has left the boundary of our game. What else do we need to know? Character's point of rotation? Location? Yeah. So we're gonna need to ask the computer to understand where the character is. So the computer needs to know where the character's location is. Don't. We're getting too detailed at the moment, but I like the way you're thinking. Yeah. Let's keep it basic, okay? Let's keep it in everyday terms, okay? What else do we need to know? If we walk off the edge, boof, we need to reset our character's location somewhere, right? Yeah, so we got to figure out where this character is going to respond to. And respawn location. I think that's probably it, right? We need to understand, or the computer needs to know that we've walked off the edge. The computer needs to know the current location of our game controller, of our player, and the computer is going to need to know where we're going to send this character after some sort of event or trigger has been fired off, right? Before we get started, I think this is a really important thing to remember and understand. This is like Photoshop. There's 1,000 different ways to do this, okay? This is just a way. It's not the best way. It's not the wrong way. It's just a way of skinning this cat, okay? If you go online and start doing some research, looking for code samples and snippets and structures and stuff, you're going to find that there are 1,000 ways to do the exact same thing. People will argue back and forth as to which way is the best way of doing something. And there are pros and cons for every single scenario. Point being, there's a lot of different ways to approach this, okay? So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. I'm not advocating like this is the best way. That's not what I'm doing here, okay? My goal in this process over the next couple months is just to help you guys understand the logical structure of how all this code is put together. I'm not a programmer by trade. That's just not what I do, right? But I know a lot about programming and how computers work and the sequential steps that we need to go through to execute a script to drive a function inside of our code itself. If you come up with another way that serves your purpose, do it, man. I have no problem with that. I really don't. Use your own experience and your own understanding of what you've created to drive the functions inside your game, okay? I hope that this entire process empowers you, okay? And another small little thing before we continue this conversation, and I should have said this before, okay? It is impossible to memorize all this stuff, right? Impossible. It's a fool's errand to think that you're going to be able to memorize every single line of code that you've ever written. Okay? Fool's errand. Okay? It's not about what you know, it's about knowing where to find it. Okay? It's about knowing where to find it. Take notes. Save every line of code that you've ever written. Okay? Comment, and we'll look at what commenting is. It's a way of like taking notes inside the scripts so that you can understand what it is that you're putting together. I have an application on my Mac over here that allows me to save all these code snippets and kind of organize them and tag them so I can have some sort of contextual understanding of their role in the larger kind of scheme of things. But it's not about what you know, it's about being able to find that thing that you're looking for. Okay? I like to think that I used to, in previous iterations of this class, I used to have this big huge stack of papers that I'd bring out. Like every time, that was my old school code library. I like flip through. It's like, okay, I wrote this down this way one time. I don't do that anymore, obviously, but it kind of illustrates what you need to do. All right. So this is kind of the logic that we need to establish here, okay, or the outcomes that we're trying to establish. We need to understand that we've walked off the edge. We need to understand the character's current location, and then we need to tell the computer or figure out where we want to send that character, okay? So how are we going to do that? What systems are in play here, right? Because there's really two big systems that we need to create in order for this interaction to take place. What is a system? Don't think in computer terms, just think. What is a system? I like it. So I'm going to take it one step further and say it's a whole series of interconnected elements that all work together to generate something, an outcome, a result, right? Inside of game development or just programming as a whole, we're never really designing one system. We're designing a whole bunch of smaller systems that can all be plugged together to do something of much higher quality or bigger results, right? So what small systems do we need to figure out here and create? Before we can build anything in Unity, we've got to figure out what it is that we're trying to create. We understand the outcomes, right? These are the outcomes that we're trying to strive for, but now what do we need to make systematically? What do we need to make? Not so much a rule set, okay? Let's start off with the first outcome. We need a system that allows us to detect when the character has walked off the edge, okay? Okay, so we need some sort, and I'm actually going to call this the death zone system itself, okay? The death zone system. Understanding these systems usually is a great place to understand how many scripts, how many individual little packets of programming code we're going to need to make, okay? So the death zone system is going to be one, because this system is going to do one thing, right? What do you think that's going to do? Not so much kill, right? That's a different thing. This is going to understand that the player has left, okay? So this is going to be a trigger event-based system, okay? Where when a character passes through a collider, an event will happen, okay? So we have a death zone that's going to serve as a trigger, okay? I'm actually going to do one thing, and you'll see this here in a minute. This is just going to broadcast a signal, okay? I'm going to put broadcaster on here, okay? This is just going to send a signal out and say, hey, something's passed through me, okay? That's all it's going to do. Just one thing. Systems are best when they do one thing quite perfectly, okay? It's going to detect that something's passed through it, and it's going to send a signal. That's all it's going to do, okay? Now, we also need another system in here, and that will be, let's just call this one respawn, okay? The respawn system is going to do a little bit more, right? The respawn system is going to transform our player's location. Okay. So this is the one that's physically going to be responsible for moving our player. And going forward, whenever I say transform, I'm talking about position, rotation, and scale. So we're physically going to change the position of something. Transform player location. Rock and roll. Okay? That's it. That's all we're going to do. Right? Something's going to cross through. It's going to send a message. That's going to receive the message and change the player's location. That's all we're going to do. Okay? Should we start writing it? Now that we understand this, we have two different scripts that we need to establish. And an FYI, Brandon, I'm going to give you all this stuff too, so no need to take pictures of me doing my Vanna White up here at the board, right? I've always wanted to see what I look like in a blonde wig and an evening gown, right? I think that'd be pretty fun, like Vanna. Sparkly, like Vanna White. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? Okay, good, okay. Anyways, I kind of want to see that now too, right? Pat as Vanna White. All right. Let's jump in and take a look at how we're going to write all this stuff. So first things first, let's do the low-hanging fruit, the death zone, okay? When we're creating this thing, we want to write and test, okay? We're going to write some lines of code, and then we're going to test to see if it works, okay? This is going to be kind of an organic process as we flow through all this stuff. Are you okay? Yeah, all right. Let's do it real fast. Let's start writing some code and testing it out. Now for us, we're going to start our kind of exploration, if you will, of programming using a very, very, very simple programming language called Java. This is not the best. It's not the most robust. It's a good one to start with. It's an easy one to learn, okay? We're going to work with Java for about a month, and then starting right around, right around spring break, we're going to transition, and we're going to start looking at C#. Because the C level of code, okay, that programming language is really where we're going to end up, okay? Learning C# and its brother C++ is the desired outcome for every programmer. The universal language, okay, the common denominator, the vernacular of the game development community is what? I'm going to say programming, okay? Programming as a whole, okay? It's not the art, believe it or not, okay? It's not the animations, believe it or not, okay? Programming is the universal language inside of the video game development industry. So even though you guys are preparing for maybe a career as an animator or an artist inside of the 3D community, you still need to be a good programmer because everyone is going to be speaking that language when you jump into a studio, okay? So let's make our first little JavaScript here. It's pretty fun. I'm going to go into the, well, there's going to be something we're going to do first, right? I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this scripts. And note that I've put a little underscore at the beginning of that folder. What does that little underscore do? It does make a space, right? Visually it makes a space, but organizationally, what does it do? Puts it at the top of the list. That's its sole function, because if it didn't have that underscore at the beginning, it would sort this list alphabetically, right? The scripts folder is going to be a really important one for us. So I'm going to keep it at the top of my list to make it easy to get in and out of. And then if you have that folder selected, anything that we create going forward is going to go inside that folder. So let's create our first JavaScript. Okay. Now, we're going to be writing the name of our scripts very, very specifically, okay? We're going to be employing what's called camel case, okay? Where the first letter of the first word is going to be lowercase, and then the first letter of each subsequent word is going to be uppercase. Now, inside of the world of game programming, notice that we don't put spaces in between the words, okay? Why? Does anyone know why? Spaces mean other things in other programming languages. They really do, right? Believe it or not. If you're working on a web server, a space can denote the beginning of a new file name or the beginning of a new command in other programming languages, right? So we want to make sure that we're making scripts that are going to be usable in a lot of different scenarios. So no spaces in our file names, okay? I'm going to call mine Death Zone, okay? And if you double click on it, it's going to open up an application called MonoDevelop, okay? Now this is the first time I've launched MonoDevelop on this machine. Hopefully, fingers crossed that it works. Hopefully. I got the beach ball of doom here. So double clicking on a script in the editor is going to open that script in MonoDevelop. Thank you. I was worried there for a second that it wouldn't work. Okay. So welcome to MonoDevelop. This is going to be our programming home away from home. Question, Brandon? Okay. So let's take a look at what we're working with here. MonoDevelop is a pretty neat application. It's going to scan all the scripts that are currently in play inside of your Unity project directory. So this first part over here, the solution, it's going to find all the scripts that are inside of your game, which is pretty cool. So you don't have to keep going back over into Unity to select another script. You just find it here. Now we're working with Death Zone, so it's already open, so we're not seeing that show up here in the solution. We'll see the scripts over here. Let's see. Yeah, so here's another one, standard assets. So there's some other scripts in here that we can look at, some text elements. All right, anyways. All right, and then, of course, here's the script that we're working with here. It's just deathzone.js for JavaScript. Now, the syntax, the structure of our scripts are really, really important. We have to have a very high attention to detail when working in the programming world, okay? Because the structure of our code is important. The spelling, naturally, is important. It's also case sensitive. Oftentimes, the problems and the bugs that we have to smash in our scripts is because of an errant capitalized or non-capitalized word, or we've misspelled a word by like one letter and it drives you crazy, right? Because sometimes you can't see the forest through the trees, right? So case sensitivity is really crucial. Now, if you look carefully at what Unity has created for us, you're going to see kind of the default structure of every JavaScript going forward, okay? And there are two things in here that you can immediately see off the bat. They're called functions, and functions are really kind of gigantic containers in which things happen in, okay? Think of like a briefcase. If you look at the way each function is written inside of the script editor here, there's a common structure between them. There's actually two. Now, what would you say is the common structure between these two functions? So the green word, the word function, defines what it is, right? We're basically saying to the computer what follows is the name of the function and then the start and the end of that entire function itself. So we're kind of shouting to the world here, hey, this is a function, okay? We're going to do something inside of this box, okay? Or inside of this section of my little script, okay? So we declare it as a function, we give it a name, and then we start and end our function, okay? These two parentheses in here will allow us to pass in variables and arguments. They're kind of like a nice little interchange area for the function itself. We'll talk more about that at the end of the semester, okay? But we start each function with an open curly brace, okay? That's an open curly brace. That's the start of the function. That's the end of the function. Whatever resides inside of that area is what that function's going to do. Now, certain functions have a defined role, like the start function or the update function. They have a defined understanding that the development crew down at Unity has determined for us. However, we don't have to work with inside that paradigm if we want. We can create our own functions, which is what we're going to do. We have to define what that function's going to do. Certain functions that come from the Unity code base are going to be evaluated and executed at very specific times within inside the level itself. Well, when do you think the start function is going to be evaluated? When you start the game, right? When you start the game, that's the first thing that's fired off. So anything that we place inside, in between those two curly braces is going to be executed the moment the game starts, right? What about the update function? This is an interesting one. The update function has a very important role for us inside the Unity code library. Does anyone know what it is? What it does? Kinda. When is the update function evaluated? Always, okay? It's happening at every cycle, not every frame, but every cycle of the game, and we can change how many cycles our game kind of fires off. It can go pretty fast, right? Like 2,000 cycles a second, right? So the update function is the container that's always asking a question, right? If I wanted to register a key press, okay, or if I wanted to see if if two characters kind of collided with each other, I may have to ask those questions inside the update function, right? Things that we always want the computer to be evaluated at every moment of the game goes in the update function, okay? Let's just showcase that for a second here. We're going to be playing around with the update function just for a brief moment, and let's just write our first line of code here, okay? I gotta be honest with you. I like writing like this. This is a little bit easier for me to understand and see all this, okay? Because now I have the open and closed curly braces at the same tab level. So this is how I do it. However, you'll see a lot of folks do it the way the defaults are as well, okay? I just put, the open and curly brace on its own level. Okay, so let's have fun here for a second, okay? All right, so let's do this. On line 10, I want to hit the tab key one time. Let's just type in that, debug.log, okay? Debug.log, this is something that we're going to be doing often. This is going to write a small little message to our console, and it's a great way for us to test, to see if something is actually happening, okay? Let's do this. Let's give ourselves a custom message. So this is the command that we're firing off, okay? Now, each command has kind of a uniform defined structure to it. This is the command, and then each command is terminated with a semicolon, okay? This semicolon is the computer's way of saying, you're done, no more, okay? End of line, okay? This command is complete, okay? So every command is terminated by a semicolon. Inside the parentheses, we can pass in some information, and this is what we're physically going to write. Yay! There we go. So whatever's in your quotes there is going to be placed in the console, okay? So we're basically writing ourselves a small little message. That's all we're doing. It's just a message, okay? And it's a great way for us to see if things are working the way it should be working, okay? Now, since I put this debug.log inside the update function, what do you think is going to happen when I start my game? It's going to say, yeah, a lot, right? Because the update function is evaluating all the time, right? It's going to keep printing this small little message to my console on every cycle of the game. I'm going to save my file. Command S to save my script. Command Tab to jump back over into Unity. And let's throw that script on something, okay? Now, our def zone script needs to be placed on a game object. Scripts, by definition, are game components. So they're always going to be the child of a larger game object itself, okay? Keep that in mind. Scripts do nothing until they're attached to something, okay? I have a problem with my script. I might have misspelled something. Down here in the console, see I got this little error. This is not a bad thing. Well, it means something's wrong. But we don't freak out. If you double-click on it, it will actually take us to the line of code that we need to fix. And I made a small little error. This has to be a capital L. Let's save it. Go back into Unity. Yeah, there we go. And that error went away. All right. Okay, so let's get to work here. Let's place my little def zone script on something. Now, I'm going to put it on a collider, okay? Or actually, let's just test it out real fast, okay? Let's put it on an empty game object, okay? So this empty game object is going to be responsible for physically generating the death zone itself. So I've traveled up to the top of the screen under the game object pull-down menu, and I'm going to do create empty. Okay. Now this is going to put an empty game object at the origin of our scene, and there it is. Okay. And let's be good stewards of our scene. Let's give this a name. Let's do what makes sense here. Death zone. Okay. And now let's apply that script, that death zone script, to my death zone game object. Okay. Now there's a couple different ways that we can go about doing this. Scripts are going to be components, component pieces of the larger game object structure. So there's a couple different ways that we can attach or associate this script to the game object. The first way, let's just do it real fast. Here's an easy way. Please note that I have my death zone game object selected inside of my hierarchy. And then over here in the inspector, we can go add component. We'll get the cool little pull down menu. Then we have scripts. And this is going to go through and check it out. It's going to find every single script that's currently sitting inside of my Unity project directory. And what's there? Boom, baby, death zone. However, look how it's spelled. Cool, huh? It actually capitalized the D and put a space in there. This camel case hierarchy is known inside of the larger Unity world, okay? So you don't have to worry about it never getting that space in there, because in a lot of different areas, Unity is going to do it for us, okay? So let's go grab Death Zone. All right. And let's play our game. Yeah. Yay! Okay? So if you get something showing up down here in your console, mission accomplished, right? We've now created a condition. That condition's been met, and just this one little phrase has been placed inside of my console. Now, I'm going to stop the game for a second, and I'm going to look at my console. The console is really kind of where elements like this are going to get printed to. And did I just register just a single one? Did it write yay just one time to my console? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Not just one time, 1,000 little yays, okay? It's actually kind of fun. Let's do it real fast. I'm going to clear it. Check this out. I'm going to play my game. I'll watch what happens to my console. Just look at my screen here real fast. Oh, actually, there we go. Bloop, 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 bloop. It's always writing yay, because every time, every cycle of the game, it's looking at the contents of that update function container, right? And every frame of the game, or every cycle of the game, is saying debug.log, 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 and it's writing yay as many times as it can inside the console. Okay, let's stop the game for a second. Command P. I'm going to clear out my console, and let's return to my game object inside of my scene. All right. So clearly, I don't want to be writing just a simple word to my console. I want my death zone script to physically do something for me. Now, based on our conversation that we had before, this death zone script really needs to detect some sort of collision, some sort of trigger event. We need to understand when the player has passed through it, right? Colliders are a great way for us to create this functionality, okay? Colliders allow us to understand when a collision event happens, right? Unbeknownst to you, every time you run into a mesh collider on your game, Unity is logging that collision. It's saying, game object just ran into Forge, game object just ran into a cube, right? It's capturing all that information. We want to access that and use it to drive some sort of function in our game itself. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, let's look at your script. Okay, so get rid of that semicolon right next to the open curly brace. Okay, and you also have too many curly braces. Get rid of one. There you go. Also get rid of that semicolon. There, and get rid of the curly brace on line 4. Yep. There you go. Save it. Let's see. Go back into Unity. Let's see. There it goes. It went away. One thing, and I just saw Demetrius do this, and I've seen a lot of folks do this when when we're working and going back and forth between MonoDevelop and Unity, you don't necessarily have to go in and physically close down the application by clicking on the red X, okay? You don't have to do that. Actually, I wouldn't recommend doing that, because when you do that, it closes the application. You're going to be going in and out of MonoDevelop all the time, okay? So leave it open. It's okay. It's not going to hurt anything, right? Leave it open and then just bring the Unity editor into the foreground, okay? That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to click back over here in Unity and continue working. All right, so I want to put a collider on my Death Zone game object. Add component, physics 2D, physics, and then I'm going to use a box collider. Simple box collider. Bloop. Okay, let's position this thing. Let's make it pretty big. Here's another great little power user trick when working inside of Unity. If you put your cursor on these badges right here, they actually turn into sliders. Okay, so you don't have to know the values numerically. I mean, you could enter them in numerically if you wanted, but I don't know what those are. So if I just put my cursor on the X and drag, yeah, it's making it bigger. There we go. Now I can see it, and I'll also do the same thing for the Z. Yeah, awesome. So now if I play the game and run off the edge, oops, why is not a single thing happening? I broke it. I broke it already. Oh, did I not? I did not put my Death Zone plane, directional light forge, make camera. I did not put my first person controller prefab, or that got deleted somehow. There we go. I don't know how that happened. All right. Here we go. Now we're back in action. If we run off the edge of my map, oh, yahoo! Wait a minute. Oops. What's going on right now? It's just a normal collider. We didn't do one magical thing. You got it. So in order for this collision to be captured and for the computer to genuinely drive the event itself, we have to return to the box collider's properties. And one of which is really important, is you probably can guess it, is trigger. We need to enable that. Let's turn it on. Yoink. Okay. And now, instead of serving as a magical invisible wall, watch what happens when I run off. Woo! I'm just going to fall forever. Okay? So we're stepping closer and closer and closer to what the desired result is going to be. We've created a game object. We've added a box collider component to that that's acting as a trigger. And we have a simple script now that we can use to capture that trigger information and begin to develop the desired outcome, which is to move our player back to a location inside of the scene itself. All right, let's do it real fast. I want to jump back over into MonoDevelop, and let's start working here. Okay, so debug.yay. Let's get rid of that, okay? Don't need that anymore, because we're going to write our own little function here. This function is going to allow us to capture when we pass through one of those colliders, okay? So let's write our own function, because we don't want it to happen on every single frame. We only want this action to happen when we pass through a collider, when we enter into one of our triggers. So I want to give myself some return breaks here. Some more lines of code. And here's what we're going to do. Of course, we need to declare that this is a function by writing the word function. On trigger, enter. Okay. So as you would imagine, this is going to allow us to capture some collision information when we enter into the scene. Now, following the structure that we outlined earlier, we had to have an open parenthesis and a closed parenthesis, followed by an open curly brace, and I go down a couple lines, and a closed curly brace. Okay? Let's do this. Let's test. Let's see if we actually capture some trigger information here. Whenever we're writing scripts, it's a really good practice to test as we go. That way we can troubleshoot and smash the bugs and understand what those bugs are, right? Because when you're working on this huge machine, often it's so complex that we don't really understand what's going on, and getting rid of the problems is rather difficult. So let's test the system while we're building it with a simple debug, okay? So if you look at this, what we're asking the computer to do here is to detect when we've passed through a trigger, and then when we do, to write something to our console. In this case, it's going to say, let's have it do something more than yay. Like you hit the trigger. There we go. So if I see you hit the trigger inside of my console, I know that at the very least my machine is working, okay? Let's save it, go back into Unity, and test it. Let's play the game. Ah, time for death. Yahtzee, boom shakalaka. If you look at what happened here, inside the console, it printed, you hit the trigger. Wonderful. Okay? It works. At a fundamental root level, our little system is now passing information from one thing to another, and it's working. Yay! Was everyone able to get something printed to their console? Yeah, Demetrius, what you got? Yeah. Yeah, so did it work when you played your game? Well, you got to put your first-person controller prefab in there too, okay? Yeah, Tom, I'm sorry, question.
I keep getting that audio phone.
Yeah, so if you're getting that audio listener, go into your hierarchy and delete your main camera. It's not affecting the gameplay, but that's what's generating that console addition. Say again? Yeah, right, because we're only entering the trigger one time, right? Yep. All right, so now that we have something working here, let's continue writing some additional lines of code to make this a little bit more impactful. Now, I don't necessarily need to see that I have that I've hit the trigger with this console when this debug.log. I don't need to see that anymore, right? That was just a test. So I'm going to delete that line of code, understanding that the system is still kind of working. Let's get rid of that. And now let's ask the computer to do a couple things, okay? All right. So this is where it gets kind of fun. Because we're going to send a message out. We're going to broadcast a message out there in our world. And this is a really easy thing to do initially, okay? We're going to expand upon this as we go through the rest of the semester and talk about Booleans in a big way, which are nothing more than gigantic light switches, okay? That's how I think of it. We switch something on, it's true. We switch something off, and it's false. But for right now, I think these little messages are kind of fun to send to one another. Because I think the idea of broadcasting a message and having that message be received is pretty easy to handle onto. However, what we need to do is that we need to capture all of this trigger information. And we're going to save it in what's called a variable. A variable, inside the world of computer programming, is just a container. It's just a word. At the moment, we're going to name that variable other for reasons unbeknownst to myself. I just feel like making it be other. I could say this is Pat's dog, or it could be gray computer. It's just a word, okay? Now we want to make an association with that word to some actual data. So whenever we create a variable, we need to data type that variable, okay? And here's what we're going to do. We're going to say space colon. We're going to say that other is going to be collider information, okay? in every sense, oftentimes variables are used to distill long chunks of code into one word. You'll see this in further examples in the future. And so, I can take 4 lines of code, capture it as one variable, and then instead of writing each of those, that 4 line of code block 1,000 times, I just write that one word, and the computer knows that I'm referencing that big chunk. Okay. All right. So we've made a variable. It's called other. It's going to be capturing collision information. And now, inside the function itself, this is where the work begins, okay? So we're going to call that variable other, okay? There's a game object. And please note that I'm capitalizing object, okay? It's going to be other.gameObject.sendMessage. And message, is capitalized. So what we're saying in here, if something that passes through me is a game object, okay, I'm capturing collision information. If it's a game object, I want you to send a message. I want you to broadcast a message inside the larger Unity scene itself, okay? So if the collision, if what just collided with me is a game object, I need you to send a message. Okay? Well, what message are we going to send? Let's put 2 parentheses, and then we'll end our line of code there with a semicolon. Okay? So what we've written is the command, and then what we put in parentheses are kind of extensions of the command. Okay? Some extra bonus stuff that makes it a little bit more specific. So we're going to send a message. Well, what message are we going to send? That's what's going to go inside the parentheses. Okay, what we're physically going to broadcast out there into the world. So what are we going to send? Let's go into our parentheses. 2 colons or 2. I'm having a brain dump on a Friday afternoon. Quotes, pair of quotes. Okay, whatever goes inside the quotes is going to be the actual message, and we're going to do on death. Kind of morbid, don't you think? Yeah. So we're basically saying death. You are dead. Okay? We're broadcasting that message out into the scene. Now there's one other thing. This is a real technical thing. After on death, and it's linked quotes there. We're going to put a comma, and we're going to do send message. Send message options. Okay, this is a technical thing, and what it means is, or what we're doing here is, don't require a message back. Don't require a receiver. Okay, so we don't need anything back in return. It's just a free broadcast. It's as if I go out the front doors and just shout at the top of my lungs on death, with no expectation that anyone shouts anything back to me. All right. That's it. Let's save it. Go back over into Unity. Oops, looks like I made a mistake. Okay, it says don't require, I just misspelled it. I before E except after C. If it goes away, yep, it went away, so life is good. All right. So, let's jump through our trigger again and see what happens. Based on what we've written, are you expecting anything to happen? No, not a single thing, right? These messages, these broadcast messages are invisible. Let's run through it one more time just to see what happens. Whee! Okay, so I stripped out that debug line from my script, so we're not getting anything to console, which makes sense. We did actually jump through the trigger, and we did broadcast it, but nothing's receiving the message. Okay, nothing is taking that information and doing something with it, right? Well, now what we have to do is that we have to start creating the other side of our our logic flow here. Okay, because if you remember earlier, there's two things that we were trying to build. We needed to make a death zone, yeah, rock and roll, did that, right? But now we need to create some sort of respawn system, okay? Some sort of respawn system that takes some information, a message, and does something with it, right? So this is the objects that's just shouting a word. This script is going to hear that word and then do something. Nathan, do you have a question? Okay. So let's write a new script. And I'm going to name this one new JavaScript. I'm going to call this one spawn. Oops. Spawn. Come on. Spawn. I cannot spell today. There we go. Spawn controller. Okay. And let's put that inside of my scripts folder. There we go. All right. Let's double click, take a look at it. Since I didn't close my death zone script, it's open in here in a tab, which is kind of nice. All right. Let's start working here. Okay? Because this one's going to be just chocked full of a whole bunch of scripts. Now, in order for us to spawn a character, we have to do a couple things, right? What's the first thing that we need to do? If we're trying to place a character in a very specific location, what do we need to do? And more specifically, define that location, right? Where are we going to move our character, right? It's just not going to randomly change, in a scene, right? We need to define very, very directly where we want that to go. So I want to make a new function called spawn. So function spawn. Open, close parentheses, open curly brace, close curly brace. Okay? So the whole purpose of this one custom function is to determine where inside of our scene we're to be placing our character. Okay? Let's start the process of writing that down. So we need to do something to the game object that this character, or excuse me, we need to do something to the game object that this script is attached to. Okay? So we want to change the position of whatever this script is attached to, which is going to be our first-person controller prefab. So I'm going to write transform dot position. Now, what do you think I'm doing here? Yeah, and specifically, I'm going into the transform section of the game object, the position channels, okay? So I've basically, and if I wanted to change the scale of my object, what would I need to put in here? Instead of transform.position, what would it be? Transform.scale, right? Because then we'd be accessing the scale channels inside the transform component of the game object that we're working on, okay? So transform.position, and then we need to set it to something, okay? Now, we're going to do an equal sign in here. And that equal sign is very important because one equal sign is going to set values from one thing to another. So we're changing something in here, right? We're making a change with one equal sign. In the future, we're going to have two equal signs, which is going to serve as a comparison, right? We're asking to see if there's a difference between the two. So one equal sign is set. Two is going to ask for a comparison. So what are we going to change our position to? I don't know. Where do we want our game object to start? Top of the roof? That'd be fun. I don't know. We got to figure this out, right? I don't know what the answer to that question is, and I want to write my script in a way that kind of imbues some flexibility in the actual programming of code. This is a great opportunity for a variable, right? An empty container that we get to populate with some data. I don't know what that data is yet, but I can write the variable initially so that I can figure it out. So let's do this. I'm going to create a new variable, and we create public variables at the top. Okay, these are called public variables. If they're outside of a function, that means this variable can be used by any function inside the entire script. Okay, and as you would imagine, if there's a public variable, there's also a private variable. and that's information that's only available to a specific function. So public we can use everywhere, all right? We create a variable just by typing var for variable, and of course we got to give it a name. Let's do spawn point location. That's just a name. You can call it Pat's crazy spawn point location. I don't care. It doesn't matter. It's just a name, okay? However, we have to data type a variable. Every time we create one, we have to tell the computer specifically what it is, okay? We do that with a colon, and then I'm going to type with a capital T transform. And then a semicolon, okay? By writing transform, this is going to create an empty container in the inspector that will allow us to take the location of something else and plug it into this slot. Trust me, once you see this, you'll go, okay, I get it. Okay, it's pretty neat. Okay. All right, so I'm going to copy the name of my variable here. Hey, oops, clicked on the wrong thing. I'm going to paste it down here on line 16. And I want to get the position information of my variable. Okay. All right, let's save our script and go back into Unity and start setting all this up, because we've done a couple things in here that we need to continue working on. Okay, so now we need to have a game object that's going to serve as the location of our spawn point. Okay, so let's make an empty game object here real fast. Game object, create empty, and let's call this just for, we'll call it spawn point. Okay. Where is it? It's right there, and I'm going to put mine on top of my house. I think that'd be funny. Somewhere up there. So when you spawn above the house. Okay, you fall off the edge of the map, you spawn on the top of the house, you're good to go, right? Now what I need here is that I need to, this has a whole lot of crazy numbers in there, okay? I don't want to have to memorize or copy down all those values. I'm going to grab this entire game object, and most importantly, the transform component of this game object, and feed it into that variable that we just created over in our script, okay? Of course, our script needs to be attached to something, and I'm going to spawn controller. I'm going to put that on my first-person controller prefab just by dragging and dropping on it. Let's collapse all this stuff. Yeah, there it is. Spawn controller script. That's the one that I made. And look what we have here. Spawn point location, and right now it's set to none. Okay? This is the variable that we created in the script, and when we data typed it to transform and made it a public variable, that public variable shows up here in our inspector, which is pretty neat. Okay? And now what we've created is a drag and drop environment. I'm going to take that empty locator, the empty game object that I placed on top of my house, and I'm going to drag it into where it says none there. And whatever location that locator is, that's where my object is going to be spawned to. So where is it? There's spawn point. And you kind of have to do it in one swift movement here. So left click and drag over there. And so now I'm loading in this game object's location into the variable on my script. Okay? I'm sending information from one game object into a script that's going to be used to determine where my character is going to be spawned when I pass through my collider. Cool, huh? Yeah. We're sending information now. Okay? Location information. And this is live, too. And what's cool about this is that since we've done this in a kind of open way, if I don't like my spawn point, I can just move this one game object, and all of that new information is going to be sent over to the script. I'm not hard coding values into my script. I'm keeping it generic. Okay? Comment? Question? I like the thumb point, the finger point. Pretty cool. Okay, let's go back into mono develop and continue working, because there's a couple things in here that we need to do, right? So we've defined what's going to happen when we spawn, okay? We've told the computer exactly where to go, when to spawn. But have we actually told the computer to spawn something? No, not yet. Not yet. Kinda. We're going to do it a little bit differently, okay? So we're going to write another function in here. Message that we created back in my death zone script that was on death, right? Function on death. When we pass through that that collider and we trigger, right? It's not actually sending a word, it's actually calling a function. We're saying on death, but it's actually saying, hey, any function that's named on death, go ahead and evaluate yourself right now, okay? Go check yourself before you wreck yourself right now. Mike and I had a moment right now. That was pretty great. Okay, so when we pass through that collider is going to broadcast on death out into our scene, right? What we're actually saying is, hey, any script that includes a function that's named on death, go ahead and fire off your contents. Okay? So what do we want to do when on death is shouted out into our scene? What do we want it to do? We want it to spawn, right? Yeah, we want it to return back to our spawn point, right? So check it out. Here's what we're going to do. Just type the word. I'm going to copy that function name, and we want to say, hey, just spawn. Okay? Of course, we got to put some parentheses and a semicolon in there. Okay? So when someone says on death, okay, all I wanted to do is to fire off the spawn function, which is going to look at the current location of my game controller, and it's going to change its location to the location of our spawn point. Okay? Let's try it. Let's see what we get. I'm going to save my script, return to Unity. And let's see if this works. I have no idea if this works. Actually, I have some idea if this works. Okay, here we go. Whee! I'm on the top of my roof. There we go. It worked. It worked. Maybe the top of my roof is not a great place to spawn to. So, and this is the beauty of the way we've written that script, is that we haven't hard-coded the values of our spawn point into our script. We're sending it this game object's location. So as a game designer, this is fantastic, because now I can say, okay, the top of the house didn't work. Let's put it maybe right at the front door. Right there. Okay, let's play the game now. Jump off the roof, or jump off the edge of the map, and boom, I get spawned right at the front door. I can do this till the cows come home. Cool, huh? We've done it. We've created our first death zone. Whee! Jump off. Then I'll spawn back. The moment I hit that trigger, it's gonna move my location, the game controller's location, back to that spawn point. Cool, huh? There's one final thing we want to do in here to really kind of round out this entire thing, and that's to determine maybe a start point for our level. Because when we first fire off this level and hit the play button, where is the game controller initially going to start? You got it wherever we place the game controller, right? That's not good practice, though. We want to define very, very specifically where we want our player to initially start his or her adventure. Yes, sir. Okay. Because we have one too many, you can get rid of that closed curly brace. That one, just get rid of that one. Yep, there you go. Save your script. Okay, so here's what I want to do. I want to make one small addition, okay? One small addition to my scene, okay? And that's going to happen in another function called function awake. I lied earlier. function start is not actually the first function that's evaluated inside of our scene, right? Function awake is, and actually there's another one before that I think it's awake and then late awake and then start, okay? So basically when the level, when we hit the play button in the editor, okay, that's when we're awaking our scene. And what do we want to do when we hit the play button in our editor, when the game starts for the first time? Spawn, right? We want to move our character to that defined location where it's going to start. Okay? We just don't want to have our character start or our player start where we've placed our first-person controller prefab. We want to control it very specifically with a known location. So what am I going to do? Just spawn, baby. Like that. Huh? I'm hip to be square, aren't I? Let's save our game, or save our script. Return back to Unity for a second. Now, please note that for me, my spawn point location is right under, right in front of the door. Initially, let's do this. I'm just as an extreme example, I'm going to put my first-person controller prefab off my map. Okay? So logic would say that if I was just at the play button, what would happen right now? I just fall forever, right? But that's not what's going to happen because of that line of code that I added inside of my spawn script. Let's play the game. Where does it put me? Right at the front door of my house. Okay? Pretty cool, huh? Pretty neato. I jump off the edge. Whee! I go back to the front door of my house. Okay? Stop the game. This is a great time to save. Wonderful. Yeah, Nathan, what you got? You can't what? All right. Let's take a look-see. What computer number are you, Nathan? 3. That's because, looking at what you've done here, you've put the spawn controller script on the wrong game object. The spawn controller script is going to go on your first-person controller prefab. There you go. Now, before you go any further, while you're there in your inspector, go ahead and load your spawn point game object in your hierarchy into the inspector channel. Keep cruising, cruise all the way down. See how it says spawn point location? Yep, that's the one. Yep. Nope, spawn point. Because we're defining where in the scene we want our character to spawn to. Good. That works. Let's go to your death zone real fast and check out what you've created there. Yeah, so this is where that death zone script gets attached to. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see that it was up there. No, you're fine. Go ahead and play it. Let's see if it works. Okay, awesome. Aha, it works. Good job. You did it. All right, other questions? So the question is, would it be better for organizational purposes? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Program these functions in without using multiple objects to do it. I mean, it seems more fluid.
Yeah, well, you're going to have something that's going to send a message to your game controller, right? Yeah, that I think if you can figure out a way that reduces this, absolutely, for sure, right?
Because you have to use the in-game objects to do what you're doing.
Uh-huh.
If you do that, you clutter your space with more objects.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
If I wanted to do with less objects, I would just get the vector information and put it in.
Very true. Very true. I mean, like I said, there's a couple different ways of doing this for sure. Yeah. Yeah, if you wanted to just, I mean, I think one of the reasons I like this is it's real simple, right? We pass through something, a message is sent, or a light switch is flipped, and then that information is then received by another game object. It also makes it really extensible and something that you can duplicate over and over and over again, right? Because check it out. What we've created here can be bundled. It can be packaged up. Check this out. This is for you folks that have a lot of death zones in the level that hopefully that you just completed, right? Well, we've already made one work, right? We don't need to go through and do this entire thing all over again, right? Because check this out. What if I took my death zone and made it into a prefab? Okay? Because a prefab is really a collection of a whole series of components saved as its own kind of self-contained little bundle, if you will. Okay? So here's what I'm going to do. I think my death zone's maybe a little bit too big for what I want to do with it. Make it a little bit smaller that way, a little bit smaller that way. That's good. Okay, cool. Check this action out. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to save my death zone as a prefab by dragging it from my hierarchy back down in here into my project tab. There it is. It's a death zone, and check it out. This is now something that I can reuse and recycle over and over and over again. Okay? What's cool about that is it's got my cool script in here too, which is kind of fun. Okay? So my death zone has been saved as a prefab. What if I did this? What if I went in and created like another small platform? Okay? Here, I'm going to, whoops. Let's make it a cube just so we can see it. Okay. Awesome. Now, am I going to be able to jump on that thing? I honestly don't know. Let's figure it out. Nope. Okay. A little too high. Okay. Awesome. Now, I have a death zone right there. Let's duplicate that thing a couple times. I'm just making a really simple example here. Oops, I missed. A little too low. Space it out some. Okay. So what if I made, I need another death zone way out over here, so if I fall off, I can get the same function, right? Or I already have a death zone created. You just drop it in my scene. Now I need to position it correctly and maybe change the size of it. I've made a small bundle now. Come on. There we go. Yeah, there we go. That'll work. And now I have a death zone under my house, but I have a death zone that uses that exact same script over here. And when I went off the edge of my platform, it also evaluated the script. Pretty cool. Pretty neato, huh? Prefabs are awesome, right? Because it allows us to recycle assets that we create, especially ones that include scripts and a lot of complex component pieces. It's a great way to work inside of Unity. All right, questions about what we've talked about so far? Yeah, go ahead. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it should still work. Yep, because it's just going to reference a specific mesh component. Yep. Yeah. It's basically defining the vernacular, the dialect, if you will, of a language. Okay? You can actually get rid of it. It's not going to change the way the script is evaluated and behaves. It's like if you went down to Louisiana or something, right? The dialect of the English language down there is kind of different, right? Things sound different. The words mean kind of the same things, but there are some differences. This is defining that we're using a very strict interpretation of the JavaScript rules. That's all it's doing. Mm-hmm. You got it. It's a private variable that's only being used inside of that one function. All right, other questions? Awesome. I explained it that well, huh? Yeah? Pretty fun. All right, it's all you're working. Good. Yeah. It's pretty fun. I really like programming because this is when our levels really begin to kind of come to life to a certain degree. They've been these static models for a long, long time. But now that we're infusing more of these scripts inside of our scene, it's becoming a true interactive experience. It's pretty fun. We're going to get there. It's still pretty basic, right? But at the very least, we can stop ourselves from falling infinitely, inside of our scene. It's a good thing to start with. Okay, so here's what I want you guys to do over the next 7 days, okay? If you haven't done so already, please make sure that you submit the final version of the level that we just concluded, your exterior level, okay? Just submit the app. You're going to have to zip up that app before you submit to the Dropbox on Canvas, okay? So luckily for us on the Mac, it's real easy. Just make sure you right-click to compress, and it'll save that app as a zipped archive, okay? And then starting next week, we're going to start building and fleshing out the details of our next level, which is going to be an interior. Now, the lab time going forward is going to be spent making the interior map work. And there's some constraints and some concepts that we're going to continue to flesh out. I'm going to save the details of that for next week when the rest of the class is back from GDC, okay? However, you guys can get a head start. Start thinking about what you want your interior level to be, okay? It can be a continuation of the theme that you created, on the exterior. I think that's an awesome idea, right? Or if you just really hated what you did on your exterior level, you can do something completely different. I don't care, right? It's your level. You get to design it. So start thinking about a concept, a theme, a purpose of this level. Just don't say, oh, I'm going to make it a cool, I don't know, this is going to be like a prison level or something, right? No, what's the purpose of it, right? Yeah, you can make it a prison level, but give it a purpose, right? What's happening in that moment? Are you escaping from prison? Are you coming into the prison? Just hanging out, right? Visiting hours, right? I hang out at prisons all the time. Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah. FYI, a little side story here. Never get arrested, right? Never go to jail. It's horrible. Don't do it. Yeah, I know a lot of you guys are planning on just going out and getting arrested tonight and going to jail. But let me tell you, I served on a jury last summer, and I can talk about it freely now because it's all over. But this young man had been sitting in jail waiting for his court date. He had been arrested. He hadn't been tried yet, right? He was waiting for a court date for 8 months, right? He was waiting for his due process to be evaluated, and he was waiting in jail for 8 months, right? Yeah, so point being, don't get arrested. Don't go to jail, right? Don't go to jail because you'll be sitting in there for a long, long time, especially in the county of Sacramento, waiting for a court date, right? Crazy. Anyways, so don't just sit in prisons, David. Don't sit in prisons. All right, questions about what we're going to be doing for next week? This is my reward for you guys for not going to the Game Developers Conference, is you don't get a whole lot of homework. Okay? Please make sure you wrap up that level. It was due today, okay? I want us to move on. FYI, continue bringing the project directory for your exterior level with you, Because in every sense, that's going to be our playground during lab over basically the next like month and a half, right? Because we're going to make a UI for that. I mean, we got a whole bunch of stuff planned, or a whole bunch of stuff that I have planned for that exterior level that will really make it into a nice little showcase of your talents. Sound good? All right. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you guys next week.